All right, we'll take a call to order. Get a quick roll call. I'm Chair Terry for the record, and Member Joy. Here. Member Buffon.
Here.
Member Carefield. Member Spiritos. We have a quorum regardless, so we will open it up for public comment. And Amber, would you like to kick off the public comments, please?
To provide public comment via telephone, call 669-444-9171. Enter webinar ID 854-4298-5677, followed by passcode 344272.
Okay, perfect. And I forgot to mention it, but most of you probably know if you've found this link, but this is the Subcommittee on Market Participation. It's 12 April, Friday at 1 p.m. We'll start with public comments locally here in person to give anybody else time to call in if necessary. So we'll open up to the floor for Mr. Alexander.
Sorry, Chair, just a quick note. We're limiting public comment to 3 minutes, so we'll give you a 30-second warning.
Good afternoon. For the record, Ed Alexander, founder of Soul Cannabis. Thanks to everything that you guys are doing. This is very important work. My public comment is a digression from today's point, but I want everybody to be aware of the fact that we are currently working on language to be sent to every regulated state, hopefully with the endorsement of the DAG and the CCB, clearly identifying the imminent and industry-ending threat of THCA. The state of Nevada Department of Agriculture has done a beautiful job of identifying total potential THC in their hemp regulations, but that same consideration has not been given in many other states. And as a result of that, we are seeing radical delivery direct to doorstep in the state of Nevada and every other legal jurisdiction of high testing 27 to 38% THCA that when converted is definitely not within the intent of the Farm Bill. So the reason for my public comments, I think we need to come together as an industry. We need to ask the CCB to be very, very, very participant in this process. If we don't take the lead as Nevada in identifying with the other deputy attorney generals and head of the compliance agencies in other states with the issues associated with this direct-to-consumer sales, gummies, flour, carts, concentrates, there's not a single product currently offered in Nevada that cannot be delivered to the doorstep in this state and is being delivered to the doorstep as we speak. So I'm just here, guys and gals. Again, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Can't wait to hear the dialogue and then talk some more about this committee at the end. But I can't stress the importance enough, guys. If we do not get in front of THCA, non-hemp, this is high THCA cannabis we're talking about, guys. If we don't get in front of it, all of the discussions that we're having today about other topics are for naught. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you guys opening this up for public comment. I'm here. If anybody has any questions about what we're doing, how we're doing it, or how they can participate, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And anybody else here for public comment? And please just state your name, and probably done this before, but state your name, and then we're giving 3 minutes of public comment. So Sarah will give you about a 90-second heads up. Awesome. If you don't, I think it's unmuted. So.
Greetings, good morning. For the record, my name is Timothy Eliato, and I just want to make a comment on, I believe, what's on today's agenda, most likely to talk about the workshop, which is being conducted in regards to, on market participation in that regard. I see similar faces. Just to make for the record, I would like to state that unfortunately the same pattern is still being it's still the norm in how in how it's excuse me. I'd like to state that for the record that pretty much the is there anywhere I could put on
operators
It'll be
business
broadcast.
with these lounges. What we don't want is we don't want these who are established businesses to feel like these independent licenses are going to be their. Yeah. So I'm just, the elephants in the room, I'm just gonna sit.
I try to be as just as as a law-abiding citizen. Mr. Director James Hum, it was in your presence in which I did question Chandler the last time about the possibility of violating the NRS code, I believe, 281. And Chandler's answer was basically stated based on the question that was asked. In other words, we came into this with an agenda. The agenda, as you heard speak, was Aisha Goins. Aisha Goins previously was the subcommittee chair for the DEIE, I believe, subcommittee within the CCB.
30 seconds.
She was established, and if this was the agenda, it is not a coincidence that most recent demographic map that was released by the CCB still pertains the same issues that we're trying to mitigate to address to begin with, which was to increase the amount of ownership within certain groups that were marginalized from the beginning. But if this was the intention, is it a coincidence that we're still within the same line in which we began? So I would just like to state for the record that voices are still being silenced during this market participation in which that same agenda is still being basically set forth.
Sorry, that's your time.
Everyone has their day in court. I have been threatened. There's serious issues I'm dealing with. All I'm saying is that with patience and with guidance, we'll surely get through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Do you mind if I take that agenda back? Sorry, that was my copy.
Yeah, that's yours.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? Please state your name for the record and 3 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Mejia. Hi, how are you? I am the co-founder of the International Cannabis Businesswomen Association, ICBWA. I'm also a participant of one of the lounge licenses for social equity. I also participated with Aisha Goins and her program. So I have discrete comments in the sense that we really need to address the issues from a social equity community in the capacity to run a business and give them equal advantages to qualify and have the same capacity to do the same thing as everybody else equally. But you can't do that if you're not providing the resources, because as you are well aware, a lot of these social equity students or people that are attempting to have this opportunity in the industry don't have the business capacity. So they're really set to lose. They're really set to default the whole license capacity to begin with. And that is because the agenda from the beginning, when the application was submitted, was constantly edited and modified and changed through the process. And when that happened, it created a pressure tone for all the social equity applicants and students to try and qualify, to try and come up with money, to try and show up. And suddenly it was 2,500 to start up. Now it's to 800,000. Now it's 250. You're juggling people, and it's not right, and it's not fair. I got to be honest with you, the system is not going to work if we are not going to structure this in a way that we're going to properly provide the resources to people, and the people who are providing these resources are being there is no conflict of interest and there's no relationship between themselves, because that's exactly what happened with the last run of those social equity applications. And being the first elected license that got selected, I'm still having challenges to this day because of the internal and administrative challenges that we endured internally and the conflict of interest of the relationships from the people at CCB, from the people running these independent programs, and from the outside capitalists that take advantage of these social equity applicants. So we really have to define what we're going to do here with this role and be equally educated to everybody and not give preferences by money or capital gain from an individual perspective. I have to be honest, it's really upsetting that I am a businesswoman. I'm a self-made Latina entrepreneur. I am from South America, Colombia, and I'm going to tell you something, the way business is done here in Nevada and the way these licenses are not being equally provided to all communities is devastating because it's set for a loss. It's not set for success. So just want to make sure you address that.
Thank you. And for me. It's her bag. Mr. Alexander wanted to give another public comment.
Just on this,
Okay.
on now the meeting.
I think maybe if you want to save it for the end, that'd be perfect. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
And
A few familiar faces here. My name is Alyssa Lloyd. I am the owner of Didiri, Nevada, currently in operations here, selling in quite a few retail stores. I'd like to address the topic this morning, I think kind of from a different perspective, as someone who's currently operating in the industry as a woman and a person of color, and just kind of provide what I think could be a think space for a solution for opportunities for other people in the market. And what I have thought of is possibly having kind of a safe space for these brands, people who want to get into the market, to be able to have their time, have their turn to try to enter the market. And my thought on that is that maybe we can use an already active kind of production license, excuse me, to have a shared facility where people can come and, of course, social equity, veterans, women, minority-owned businesses can have the opportunity to create their brand within these walls. And we can partner with maybe some retailers that may create a space for like a marketplace or something like that, that will allow these new brands the opportunity to sell their products legally. I'm not really sure, there's a bunch of semantics I think that would have to go behind this. However, I think with the support of another minority-owned company that has been operating compliantly in this space, maybe you can have that as like a management team that works hand in hand with an intermediary advocacy group that, so there's checks and balances and everything is transparent. I think that there is significant opportunity for the CCB to address some of the concerns of the community and be able to do so in a swift fashion without needing legislation, not needing to put out a new license or, seek legislation on that. But I think that the opportunity is right here within the CCB's hands. And to kind of address some of the points that were brought up today, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to show favoritism to people who have capital. It doesn't have to show favoritism to people. Usually when you see something like this happens, unfortunately, it's people who do have capital, it's people who are not within that social equity kind of situation. They're usually not veterans, they're not women, they're not people of color that come run the show. And they try to tell these other businesses how to get things done, or what they can and cannot do. What I would like to present to the board is maybe having a business that is minority owned, supporting these other businesses within this kind of warehouse space where they have the opportunity to enter the industry and don't feel silenced.
Second.
Sure. I'm going to end it there. Again, here for questions or, to think through this as an industry together.
thank you. Anybody else for public comments? And please just state your name into the microphone there and for the record. And we'll be limiting public comments to 3 minutes, and Sarah will give you a 30-second heads up.
Hi, thank you. My name is Patrice Saunders for the record, and this is Sophia Stewart. I have been a part of the cannabis industry since my 20s. I helped build the industry. Patient advocate, longtime helper, building the industry. There probably wouldn't be an industry if I didn't protect over 800 patients when I caught my federal case under Operation Chronic Problem. I got set up after I met President Obama at a healthcare reform rally in 2009. I think I got indicted in 2010 under Operation Chronic Problem. We had opened up Nevada Compassionate Care to help patients get legal here in our state program and help them with access of small amounts of medicine. I got set up by an undercover DE agent who posed as a sick patient. Fast forward for our punishment, I got 3 years probation. And during that 3 years, I had landed back on prescription pills, which I was not able to use my medical cannabis. I violated probation for my Marinol use, which was synthetic THC, which ended me in prison for 4 months because I wanted to use medical cannabis to treat my ailments. Fast forward, I get out of prison. I help grand open the Source Nevada, the dispensary. I've worked at edible companies. 3 years into us going from medical to retail, they changed the law to exclude me from working in the industry because they felt like they did not have to listen to a Black woman with rules and regulations. They proceeded to launder the money, not really help the schools, create the CCB to launder some more money and put up rules and standards that they could help their white friends and shareholders launder more money, taking it from the legacy market, criminalizing people who do not have access to capital, but they still want to be in business because this is what they were doing prior to us going legal, which has not been nothing more than legal lies. It wasn't legalized. It's been legalized to help further perpetuate another drug war. Then you guys want to have a task force to perpetuate another war on the illicit illegal market, when in reality, those are my friends and family members who can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars for licenses, which has been egregious. This last legislative session, they wrote a bill to help me get my card back or whatever, which has been traumatic because I've had to pull up all of my old things and rehash of what I've been through. After I've helped build the state of Nevada, local business owners, hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm still finding myself having to fight for social justice. It shouldn't be. Women and minority and people who helped build this industry belong in it, and not at these high fees for people to launder money to themselves and create fake business titles and more money and fines that really don't need to be in place. There's a radiation problem with medicine, things having to be remediated with mold. There's tons of things being covered up, and there needs to be a reckoning, and people need to be held accountable for what has gone on for these past 10 years.
30 seconds.
At a state level, at a federal level, I still need a federal pardon. There definitely needs to be ownership, and things need to be looked at from people who have been most affected by the war on drugs, not rich old white men and people who are writing bad legislation to further perpetuate another war. My name is Katrice Saunders. Thank you for your time, and I'll let Sophia Stewart.
Well,
speak.
I'm not going to speak because I don't know anything about the cannabis industry, and I don't practice law in this area.
Okay,
So,
well, she was just here supporting me.
yeah, I'm here to support her. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment? All right, and yeah, and Amber, is there anybody that's called in?
If you wish to provide public comment, click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen if joining by Zoom. If joining by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, and we did receive 2 written public comments submitted prior to this, so they're short enough where I'm just going to read them into the record for everybody to hear. The first one is from Daniel Steele. It says, "Hello, for the record, my name is Dan Steele. One way other states are attempting to be more inclusive in their market is through a nursery license for medical patients. A medical license in Nevada allows someone to have 12 plants, which they can use to make cannabis seeds. if the state would allow medical patients to get a non-commercial nursery license, sorry, there's a period there, to sell seeds to dispensaries. This would create an avenue into the industry that isn't so costly, while supporting medical patients and helping to build community and culture around the industry. This is something other states have implemented successfully. It's not harmful to industry sales and is a great example of market participation. Thanks. So that was from Dan Steele, and received a second one also from Dan. And it says, I want to touch on one thing. Local ag is a broad term. It doesn't say producer. It means local people who farm or explore plant science in any capacity. I read that as an opportunity to be inclusive based on passion and drive. We shouldn't be targeting an established industry that produces healthy foods and is a part of their own community. They can play if they want to, but it's really to the state's detriment. And those were the only public comments that we have received.
Chair, we have a.
Apologize. Okay, for calling in online, if you don't mind stating your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Caller with the last four digits, 1302, dial *6 to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hello? Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Roz McCarthy. I'm the founder and the CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We are the largest national nonprofit organization focused on serving communities of color, minority communities as it relates to social justice, social equity, health equity, and public policy. Thank you so much for having this platform to have this conversation. I just want to kind of bring you guys attention to a couple of things that we're doing and actually giving you some teeth and maybe some direction in regards to of creating a path of participation for minorities and women in Nevada. I did email you a document that will outline some of the points I'm talking about today so that you'll be able to reference it after this conversation. Most importantly, now is the time for us to be able to create this plan and then be able to execute and be able to show that we can create a pathway where we have real, true, quantifiable opportunity and ownership. So what we ended up doing as an organization, we did a survey and we put it out to Nevada businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses to get their input. Because I think sometimes we're not getting input from the folks that we're trying to help. We're trying to make decisions and making decisions based upon what we think and not based on what their issues are right now. So we do have that data that we want to share with you, as well as we did a town hall meeting. And our town hall meeting consisted of members in the greater Las Vegas community and throughout Nevada who were able to get on board and share with us specifically some of the challenges and some of the solutions that they think could be possible to create opportunity. The solutions that we focused on were the following recommendations: establishment of a dedicated equity fund. Access to capital is the #1 barrier to successful businesses in this industry currently right now. Development of a mentorship and training program. I know firsthand that there are people in the greater Las Vegas, Clark County, throughout Nevada who want to support and who would be willing to mentor. We need to structure this opportunity. We need to be able to create the pathway for individuals who need that mentorship and that training to get connected with those individuals who are willing to give it free of charge. And so that is one of the areas that we want to focus on. #3, enhancement of a licensing assistance program. What we mean by that is being able to, for those who are going after a license when the opportunity presents, being able to lay out the foundation of what it takes to be able to be successful in this highly complex, compliance-driven industry, but also those that have their license, what do you need now in regards to the support and assistance to carry that license from paper to operation? The next one is market access and promotion initiatives. Promote market access for products created by women and minorities. Imagine if we could have more brands and more products on the shelf of our current retail operators. Research and data collection. I talked about the data before. However, I think there's an opportunity for us to do more research, to do more data understanding, to be able to figure out exactly what's the right fit in order to achieve our end goals. Policy and Regulatory Review Committee, we really believe that the industry as a whole and Nevada as a whole, looking at our current policy, and this may not be a CCD initiative, but this is what came out of that town hall of how do we create policy that will support some of the asks that we're asking for, like an equity fund. And last but not least, a public awareness and education campaign. I still don't think enough of Nevadians know about your initiative. You guys are doing something that's so big and so special. And I think there has to be a public awareness and education campaign to bring people on board. I submitted these comments along with our desire to see the state of Nevada. I would love to see Nevada be the first state that adopts and focuses and pushes out a cannabis supplier diversity initiative. And so I sent that document outlining what that supplier initiative would look like, how to create opportunity for ancillary businesses that are women and minority and veterans and LGBTQ that can be on a contract side that can support the industry. And how do you do it? And you make this a priority for the state of Nevada. So I thank you so much for your time. You will have both documents in your email box so that you can revisit them. I would love to have that sit-down conversation and to dive into this more specifically at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And Amber, is there anybody else that's dialing in?
There is no more public comment at this time.
Okay, with that, we will close public comments and move on to our next agenda item. I'd like to, we're honored to have you join us today, Executive Director James Hum. And I know it's only been a short couple months since you've been here, but we appreciate your proactiveness and engagement with the industry so far, and would like to turn the floor over to you for some comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Jerry. Really just came out, wanted to participate in this meeting just at the very beginning, to thank you all for being here. Obviously, you know, some of the challenges addressed by public comment, as well as my conversations with individuals on the committee as well. The importance of this and access to the industry. And I'm really excited to see what can come out of this market participation. I know I probably sound like a broken record, but in my previous life, it was all about jobs, opportunity, and access to different markets and to different industries. And so obviously that this is one very specific industry, but I'm really looking forward to what this group can accomplish, bring forth to the larger CAC for us to review, and then proactively look at things that we can potentially change and help those folks that want access to the market. So really just wanted to come out. Thank you. Thank you for your dedication, for your time to the state, to this industry, and to the CAC, and then by extension, the subcommittee. So my team is available. I will excuse myself as a thank you because I don't want to influence any sort of the conversation. I want this to be amongst the committee members and give everyone else the opportunity to speak on this. So again, thank you. Appreciate your time. And CCB, my team is here and available if you need help. So
thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, and moving on to agenda item number 3. It's consideration for approval of the January 12th, 2024 Market Participation Subcommittee meeting minutes and for possible action. So we'll take a vote, and anybody like to make a motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
All right. That's what a quorum is for. Okay, we'll approve that motion. And moving on to item number 4 for.
Sorry, we just needed the vote.
I'm sorry?
There was a motion in a second. We just needed to wrap up with the vote. Just any ayes and nays, and then we can move on to the next agenda item.
Perfect. Do I have any ayes or nays?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right. Thank you very much, Kristen. And motion is approved. Let's see here. Moving on to agenda item number 4, and this is going to be for discussion only. It's a discussion interpretation of 678A.310 and 678A.450. Apologize, I probably should have printed these out before for everybody, but I do have a copy up on my computer as far as the regulation. And what I wanted to clarify, I think we've had some maybe separate conversations about it, but when we started last week, I think we framed specifically .450, and almost took the approach that the market participation and what we were focusing on was for current licensees that were operating, you know, within the cannabis industry. And I think from further discussion, clarification, it looks like we can actually address something a little bit broader and look at not just official cannabis licensees, but anybody that is participating here in the industry. And the criteria, according to 450, is in existence, operational and operated for a profit, maintains its principal place of business in the state, and satisfies requirements for the number of employees and annual gross revenue. So really, as this pertains to some of our discussions, again, it doesn't just need to be a licensee within the set, but we did receive some public comments at potential nurseries, ancillary businesses, which are all good comments, and then something for us to consider while we move forward with this subcommittee and make sure that we're not narrowing to too myopic of a scope. So any questions or comments on that from the group? Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely. All right, moving over to agenda item number 5. And the purpose of this, just if you remember our little mini homework from the last meeting, and that was we kind of divided up a few of the different sections that we wanted to address, with the addition of rural communities, kind of lumped into local agriculture that Chair Carefield or that Member Carefield brought up in the last one. So I just kind of wanted to revisit on these, and we'll go down the agenda item, starting with you, Member Joy, and see if there's anything that you were able to look at from other state markets that might apply to what we'll be focusing on in this subcommittee.
Yeah, I didn't see anything from other state markets. My conversations were mostly based with existing operators here in the state, smaller companies, non-verticals, and talking to them about their struggles and things that they're up against. So a lot of feedback. Most of the stuff I was hearing are pretty standard, what we've been hearing all along on just the financial side of it and trying to stay alive right now. Some ideas did come out about helping out with some other things. You know, something I talked to Director Crims about before he moved on was potential another round of distribution licenses. Don't see why the CCB or the state would have any issue, you know, from my perspective on potentially opening that up, so that, you know, gives an opportunity for some groups to come in, going back to our last topic that we were just discussing or covering, pretty low entry cost wise to get set up for distribution license. It gives people a foot in the door, and it helps a lot of these smaller groups right now. I was on the phone with Frank Hawkins this morning talking about it, and it's something that I think would help out. You know, we all know how tight it is. We all know how difficult it is to eke out any margin we can right now in this industry, regardless of your size, regardless of how many states you work in. Everything is specific to the state of Nevada for our conversation and what we're dealing with here. So that was one of the things that we're seeing. Getting a lot of positive feedback and negative feedback on the new tax schedule. You know, it really depends. It seems like the operators that were, you know, having a tougher time with testing, quality, things like that are liking it. Operators that were putting out good product and getting, you know, a little bit more of a dollar command in the market are now seeing a large increase in taxes. So it's kind of hurtful. That's really all I got right now. I will continue to look into stuff from other states. I don't know that, you know, the one thing that keeps coming up is the tax structure in California, but that's really not for our discussion right now. I don't think. It's bigger fish.
Do not follow their lead.
Yeah.
That's the consensus.
No, it's interesting as far as like, you know, just focusing on the tie-in between local agriculture, more maybe this one for rural communities, which Member Carefield brought up on the last one, and the distribution license. I could say from experience, having a rural license is a challenge because most of the rural stores don't do a lot of volume, so you're not shipping really large orders. And with the limited distribution channels we have in the state, you know, it can be painful, even preventative, for a company to try and ship a $2,000 order to a rural dispensary, but then also get hit with an $800 distribution fee.
Right.
So
You know, and there's stuff going both ways, because when we're talking about this, there's the product going up, and a lot of times there's the cash coming back or the payments coming back, which also carry another fee. So when you're trying to ship a $1,200 order, you know, 150 miles away or 200 miles away, costing you $150 to $200, and then another $150, $200 to bring it back. It's not penciling out, and it's not making a lot of sense for a lot of these operators.
And add stress on the retailers, because the retailers can't afford to pay it. So, you know, and it's challenging from both sides. And it just means that a lot of those rural retailers are essentially off limits.
Yeah.
And which means that the local communities aren't getting access to the cannabis, the medicine, whatever they're using it for is not there.
Yeah.
And add one more layer to that. I've noticed that a lot of the rural licenses, and I know now we have like a single license system, but previously a lot of those rural licenses did not have a medical component because they came the 2018 round. So, you know, now you have patients that actually need cannabis as a medicine in the rural communities, and they have a limited supply. So I think that is definitely something.
And I think one of our public our comments that was sent in mentioned creating like a program, a co-op type of style program, especially for patients, especially in these rural areas, that would be able to give them access. And I think it's important that we start allowing people to grow their own medicine, give them more contact with the flower and the plant, and help them to train and help them to understand what it's like to be in the regulated space. And that can also be a pathway for them getting into the market. And I'll touch a little bit on that but I think that, you know, and this would be a CCB conversation as well, but if we created an incentive program for licensed cultivators, to allow almost like a micro license to come into their facility to learn how to grow, give them a couple of plants. And then that way they're trained in real life on how to grow under regulation, and then be able to bring their flower to market. And for those cultivations that give that incentive or are allowed to work in the program, have some sort of, you know, tax break, because they are if that's their, you know, the biggest hurdle for them right now, letting that be the incentive for them participating in such a program.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think from our existing regulatory framework, that technically is available. You know, it's not too different from companies doing licensing agreements, white labeling, whatnot. But I would say for the most part, that comes with a pretty big risk for the licensee, the operators, just having the turnover. So creating some sort of incentive that would say like, all right, I'm willing to take this risk. I'm willing to open up my doors. And of course, just having more people through the facility is always going to be more challenging. But look, if there's
it's an application process. We're just speaking general, but of course, you want to make sure that the liability of the license is not in danger, of course, and that you're also not endangering any other part of the grow by having it. So it would have to be protocol. They'd have to be trained in order to be in the facility. It wouldn't be just anybody just getting to walk in and be a part and participate. So.
And I guess my point was more of like the creation of a system that does provide some sort of incentive for the licensee or benefit to the licensee to say, I am willing to take this risk and I'm willing to support, you know, this program. Because I think without that, it's going to be really difficult for a licensee to mitigate the risk that would be associated with it. So
there are some, sorry to cut you off, but you're finished. There are some pending licenses out there in rural areas too, that we could get some assistance and get those things up and running so that they can serve their communities, because that would help out a lot. Right now, I see a distribution issue. I think there needs to be more of it. And I think helping out with getting more trucks, more jobs, more people, more revenue for the state as well coming in, and more opportunity. I see it as a win-win across the board.
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of follows along the lines of speaking a little bit to that, but also the involvement of local ag outside of our current system. And something that was brought up in public comment was the threat of THCA from hemp farmers. And so I think that, which is absolutely valid. So I think we as an industry are going to have to choose, like, are we going to incorporate this and start working together and figuring out what's going to work best, or are we going to ignore it to the point where it becomes a problem? And there is a challenge where a lot of that that product that I think people are concerned of probably isn't being grown and distributed here from Nevada. But still, it's like, how do we incorporate the people that did take a risk in the hemp industry and chose to put a lot of money on the line for what they believed in and do it the right way, and now are marginalized because, it seems like
They followed the rules.
they followed the rules, and to give them their shot, how do we start incorporating them into the legal system?
Right.
So I'm not sure, maybe it's something to put on your radars.
I would go so far as to say the THCA issue is already a major problem. It's not coming, it's here.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. And I think that in my mind, the solution is, if they want to participate, then they have to be under regulation. Like, they can't, slide in that gray area of it being hemp or hemp derived cannabinoids in order to get their product onto the market. And if they want to play in the game, then they're going to have to play along the same rules that everybody else is playing in.
Yep. Even
Even though the federal government doesn't recognize it as Schedule I and all that, I think if we want it to happen in the state, then that's, in my mind, that's the only solution I see. Because it's the medicine is valid. The products that are being grown help people. But I just think that people need to understand the difference between a product that is safe and tested and regulated versus something you buy in a gas station. So I think that's, in my mind, that's what I see as the pathway, is including hemp into our regulations as far as cannabis is concerned.
And I know, I've spoken to a handful of hemp farmers around Nevada, and most of the ones that I talk to would love a pathway into the cannabis industry eventually, and are actively working on it. And setting up, maybe this falls a little bit outside of the scope of our committee. But if you were to incorporate more of the regulatory side, which I'm pretty sure that they are regulated by Department of Ag at least, but it might not just be to the level of specificity, get a couple words out, as cannabis is. So if you want that pathway of transitioning over, show that you haven't violated the intention of the cannabis industry before you join it. So I think that might be something that we can put on our radar and bring back up for the next one, dive in a little bit deeper and see if there's a way where we can start working a little bit more from the hemp industry. And there's a lot of, touching on one of the other public comments about potential nurseries. There's a lot of good genetics that come from that side of the house as well. So being able to incorporate that could certainly be a pathway. All right. Well, I appreciate the update. And Member Buffon, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah. So staying along the same theme of educating our consumers, like what Roz said, my strategy in the last couple of months was to talk to as many women and minority-owned businesses that I could, that maybe aren't in the cannabis industry, but people I know just personally that want to be in the cannabis space. And so I'm very thankful to M4MM for hosting the town hall, because we had a good dialogue there. And then also creating a survey targeting directly minority and women-owned businesses to help us get a better understanding, that data that she mentioned, of how much people know, how much they understand about this space in order to participate. And so I think it's taking more of a holistic approach, like Roz mentioned, and talking to the community that we are trying to strategize about here right now. I want to hear from more hemp farmers. I'd like for them to come into this forum and, bring their ideas and concepts to us. And so that's why I invited the people that I invited today, to make sure that we could get a broad spectrum of ideas and concepts. And some of the ideas are not fully fleshed out, obviously. But one of the concepts, like Alyssa mentioned, was a marketplace creation of some sort. When I had my meeting with Executive Director today, it was, could the CCB create a pathway by giving a license to a social equity workshop pilot program to eliminate some of the costs that would have to be fronted in order for that to get started. And then creating a space where that legacy market could come into the space and create their own products. We have some of the pioneers from the medical days here in Nevada that were there at the beginning before it actually was established, and they didn't receive a license. So how do we create a path for them to come into this market now that don't have millions of dollars? Like Katri mentioned, and I'm thinking that if we could create a way, you apply, you have to get trained and certified in how to do business and structure of a business, and then creating a way for them to be a part of this pilot program. Some of the ideas that were shared, there is a licensed cosmetologist. She owns a nail salon, and she services a lot of senior citizens. And so she wants to be able to bring her mobile unit up into the senior citizen community, allow them to come into the unit and then consume, not selling it to them, but giving her the certification or the license type in order for her to be able to allow them to consume while they're getting their services done.
The mobile consumption salon.
It was just one idea, right? We haven't flushed through all of the ideas yet and what the structure would actually look like. But along with like your agricultural businesses and some of these, like I mentioned, the cultivations, creating a couple of rows for social equity licensees to come in and learn how to grow in the regulated market. And then creating this marketplace, this farmer's market concept I've seen work in other markets, where you then bring your product to the marketplace. We'd have to partner with a retail operator that let's say once a month or twice a month, you come to this marketplace and you'll be able to try and buy these products that were made by our social equity, our minority, our brand owners, or attempting to get into the market. And that's how you test the market. Everybody swears they're the best, but this would be a way for you to actually get your product into the market and get consumer reaction. And then that would be your pathway into the industry. So those were a couple of the ideas that have just been, talked about. We haven't fleshed through what the implementation or the execution is going to be just yet. And then, of course, talking to chefs. That's an easier concept to try to imagine. Getting them into a production license or a production facility, getting them to learn how to extract, to then create their own product that they would be able to bring to market as well. And so we have the survey that is continuing so that we can learn more data and information. And I think it's just the CCB has to do a better job of getting this information out to the public so more and more people know about it, so we can have more of a public discussion. I know the meetings are here for that, but I think we just have to do a better job of maybe partnering with other organizations to try to get the word out about what it is we're trying to do here in Nevada, create something new, create something that's successful, that it might be the first of its kind in the country, which is fine. We're okay with being innovators and being first, but we also have a big issue with the capital that our social equity applicants already have access to in order for them to open with our consumption lounges. But this could also be a way for them to get their product onto the shelf or into even their own consumption lounge. I think if we create this type of marketplace, that they should be first in line into this pilot program without having to apply, or like you have a space guaranteed for you because of your license holding already as a social equity applicant. So these are just some of my ideas that kind of would like to get more details on, but I'm hoping that from this committee that we can come up with about 3 to 4 ideas that we could flesh out, figure out if we need to get legislation made and go that route, or if the CCB can just, if they can give us a license, then great. But if we have to go through legislation, then that's what we'll do. We know that the time frame that takes, but we are definitely, as an advocate here, and along with organizations that support me, we're willing to do that. We're willing to take on that. We're getting ready for the legislative session anyway. So I'm hoping that we can have some really good ideas come out of this to then present to legislators.
Perfect. And, one thing to mention is when you were talking about, I think you called it a mobile consumption lounge, but maybe a better way of looking at it would be the event permits and some of the regulations around that, and just what some of the qualifications might be, because then it's not necessarily I think the framework is already in existence and is going to be discussed coming up. So,
Well, yeah, we didn't get that bill passed
Right.
last session. It did get killed, but I think that there's a potential for us to, yes, revisit. And I know we'll probably get some pushback, but also revisiting the fact that these license holders with its new consumption lounges, they're already facing challenges trying to open, but by forcing them to go through the retail operators to get their product, it just doesn't make sense for the way that a successful business would be able to work. And so we already are looking at how we challenge that in the next legislative session. Even though we got pushback last time, we've got the licenses now, and hopefully this will be something the legislators look at and say, how do we actually get them open and operational by taking another challenge away from them getting there. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
And I'll just kind of move on to a little bit of my homework that kind of focused on veteran-owned and LGBTQ. And I noticed that, like, when I was going through all the different state programs, and I kind of looked at this from those two perspectives. And so let's see here, what did I find? That table this one. I found from the LGBTQ perspective, there was a surprising absence of other states that were using that identification as whether it was participation in licenses or anything like that. And I found that the biggest challenge was if you are from a financially distressed area, if you're a veteran, women-owned, minority-owned, there are official state certifications for that, or very specific criteria that you would fit, whether it's a zip code or an income base or something like that. And it seemed like the biggest reason that people were citing that there wasn't more LGBTQ programs was because it's a self-identification. And I did notice in Nevada under, I believe it's under .450, let me see here. I apologize, I think it might've been the other one, but it actually does create a criteria and everything for LGBTQ. And it does talk about a self-identification. So we already have that framework in our legislature here that we can use to incorporate that as part of our diversity programs and social equity programs. So I was pleased to see that Nevada was at least taking the steps to put that into its regulations. Good.
I think what's interesting about that, like you said, it's self-identifying. So, with the other qualifications, it's, proving you're a woman or a woman born at birth, whatever that looks like, proving you're a minority, proving you're a veteran. But like the proof that you are part of the LGBTQ community is a little bit different. Like, how do you prove that when you're applying or, committing yourself to that group of people? It's just a little bit different.
It is. And it was, like I said, I think within our current legislature, it's not asking for proof. It is trusting that people are going to self-identify and when I was trying to look and see, even outside of cannabis, how different states have been incorporating, benefits, access, equality. And I found a lot of that focused more around healthcare, which I actually kind of going all the way back to like the origins of like Dennis Perone and medical cannabis and the impact that cannabis had on HIV and AIDS. That made a lot of sense to me. So it was like, how can we focus on whether there's healthcare breaks or access to healthcare that might otherwise be challenging for people in that community? And then also the benefits of, again, I don't think there's nothing that comes to mind that is specific to cannabis, but just to frame it, there's a lot of benefits that come to married couples, right? So now can we expand that to LGBTQ if you have a domestic partner and they get the same qualifications? So that's a little bit of where I was focusing my research and trying to figure out like, how can we incorporate some of that? And, like I said, I had to go outside of the cannabis industry to figure out what different states are doing. The veteran side was a little bit more straightforward. And I noticed, let's see here, there was a handful of states that were incorporating things, and veteran status was specifically qualifying for, like New York, for example, they provided allocated licenses or gave points to service disabled vets as part of their licensing structure. They also created opportunities for distressed farmers. So they were looking a little bit more into the Department of Ag side. But I won't go into their state by state because I think it kind of takes away what I was going to say on my next one. But yeah, that was the feedback that I got. And I think if there's anything else from your reports, we'll move on to the next agenda item. So, okay, I appreciate you guys doing the research behind the scenes and taking on a little bit of homework. So I think these conversations, obviously we're not going to solve everything right here, but hopefully it stimulates some thought for things that we can go look at and bring back to the table for the next agenda items. Which, before that slips my mind, I think there's a lot of things that were brought up, public comments and even outside of that would be valid discussion points, but not on this month's agenda. But if we do have these things, we can always add them to next month's agenda and give us a real platform to be able to discuss them.
Agreed.
So moving over to agenda item number 6, and this is a discussion of target areas for market participation efforts. So I printed out this here, which I know you've seen it for the first time, and it's a I know an easy 50-page read or something, so I'm not going to dive through it right now. But what I was trying to do is look outside and see what research is out there that might be able to help us and bring us in. So things that are on the table for us are subject matter experts. That could either be authors of white papers, people that experiences, regulators from other states, if they have similar subcommittees in other states. These are all things that we can discuss bringing forward for presentations in the future. This was probably the best document that I found from scouring the internet. This is from January 2024, so pretty recent as well. I'll read this in. It's titled Mapping Cannabis Social Equity, Understanding How Ohio Compares to Other States' Post-Legalization Policies to Redress Past Harms. So I found this, if you Google search Mapping Cannabis Social Equity and Ohio State University, you'll be able to find this. So you can take this home and go through it. But I took a couple notes from this document that I thought was interesting. And specifically, there's a section in here that's titled Industry Participation. And they frame industry participation, which I think is very similar to our market participation, as really looking at it in 2 ways. The first was license assistance to include financial and or technical assistance. And then the second was equity license allocations and preferences. And, if we're to touch on the second one, it seems like creating specific social equity programs, which might not be the scope that we're trying to focus on right here. But the first one of license assistance to include financial or technical assistance, I think certainly does start playing into what we're looking at. And what I found is 20 states have provided licensing assistance. And I think this does kind of address open or breaking down some of the barriers for participation in the market from current licensees. That, remember, we also have a thing to look at here that's emerging small businesses. So there's been a lot of discussion about capital constraints and challenges there, which I think is absolutely a concern. And so a couple other things that I read here: Arizona, they offer fee waivers for some of this. Will go into my veteran research, but I think it's veterans was just one of the qualifications. So it's just, I'll frame it moving forward as equity licensees. Arizona offers fee waivers. Connecticut actually gives loans up to $500,000 with 6 to 9% interest, which is probably a third of the interest rate that some of us are finding. New Jersey allocates up to $250,000 for startup and operations costs. Delaware also offers low interest loans and grants. They have their own micro business licenses that have discounted fees and biennial renewals. Virginia offers low or zero interest loans. Colorado, financial technical support. Then Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, and Vermont all had various levels of financial support for not only social equity licenses, but small businesses. So I think as a little bit more homework, take a look at this document and go through it. And it really does a good job of breaking down like the different types that we're looking at here. And
I'd like to, sorry.
Please.
I'd like to add to the record that Arizona did not make sure that to cover the social equity licenses. So they didn't have any restrictions on predatory practices. And I think from my last count report that I got from our Arizona State Director, 90% of those social equity licenses are no longer in social equity applicants' hands. They've been bought up by MSOs. And so the social equity program in Arizona is defunct at this point, or defunct. It just doesn't exist anymore. Less than a year after they issued out those licenses. So, and fee waivers is one thing. It's the same thing that we did here in Nevada, but it's not getting those social equity applicants anywhere closer to opening because the other independent applicants, we made sure that they had $200,000 in the bank. That was part of the requirement in order to apply for that license, because obviously you're going to need some capital in order to open up, in order to get started. And so that's been the challenge for our social equity applicants, is finding the capital to even get the building and all the other things that you need to actually open up. And so I just wanted to.
That's a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't,
limit it to just social equity.
It's a challenge for everybody. And, the point you brought up about Arizona, and I didn't know that. So thanks for bringing that to our attention, but I can see the other side of that. And I think we'll run into that here too, with a lot of the social equity licenses. Once they get in and find out what this industry is really like and how difficult it is, don't want to take away their ability to get out and make whole.
Yeah, right.
Because and you can speak to it.
Yeah.
Everybody that's involved in the industry right now, if somebody's willing to try to check, a lot of people are ready to walk away.
Yeah, and I think you certainly see the situations where there are companies that are looking for the face or the front, like let's find somebody to check this criteria and then we'll get the license and we'll buy them out or something along those lines. And I think there's a negative aspect to that as well. But then at the same time, there's a positive aspect where if, to your point, you're a social equity license and you get into the industry, you run into your challenges a couple years in and somebody buys you out. Is that the worst thing for that licensee and for that person? Like, look, they had a shot, they made something out of it. I mean, there are plenty of people that
they risked a lot.
They risked a lot. There are plenty of people in cannabis that have that exact strategy, is like, I'm going to get in, I'm going to sell as quick as possible.
And I think another lane that we're missing when we're talking about social equity, and Roz mentioned it in her report, is the ancillary and supply chain side of this industry. Creating a pathway to inclusion might not be a license holder, but it could also mean somebody who's supporting the industry. And when you think about the supply chain businesses, you're not limited by 280E. You're not limited by safe banking. So, you can get a loan on a business that is lighting company or a potting or soil company. And so I think that all of those states that you mentioned and their social equity programs, I think that is something that we're missing, talking about the supply chain and maybe giving an incentive to license holders that if they have a certain percentage of equity or minority owned vendors that they are doing business with, then they get a break on taxes as well.
Yeah, from my experience in the industry so far, that would be the area I would be looking at if I wanted to be participating and have a low barrier of entry and do something meaningful and create a real business that can, support some employees and families. That's where I'd be looking. And I love the idea of looking to the government and other groups to help fund them. I think it'd be a lot easier to get funding for ancillary businesses than it would for licensed operators and things like that, and help them and lower risk.
Let's see here. I think this probably falls within the scope of this agenda item, but when we're looking at this, there's almost like two criteria, right? There's call it like pre-licensing and post-licensing, and maybe the post-licensing side, I think I see a lot of states that do focus on, or also even expand that as in like the license application and beyond stage. There's a lot of states that have obviously addressed whether it's microloans, set aside the challenges of underwriting those, but loans, fee structure breaks, tax credits, those kind of things. I think that's great once you're in the industry. I think when we're starting to look at how do we support emerging small businesses, those are all things that are obviously on the table, but also challenging because from my experience, most of the costs, I mean, yes, taxes are horrible. The annual application fees are painful, and certainly breaks on those would help. But most of my business challenges are outside of those structures. And I say that not being a cultivator and knowing that the cultivation tax is huge for those license holders. But I think there might be more limitations as far as like what can the state control, what can the CCB control, and it really does probably looking at licensing fees and that sort of structure. Now we're talking about like the pre-application and how do we start making it more inclusive and providing a pathway for people to have a better chance of entering the industry. I think there's a couple things that we can touch on, but one that came to mind for me was there's been discussion for license holders about having formalized training with the CCB that license holders would have to attend. And I think that starts creating more of a bridge between the regulators and the operators, being able to create training classes for operators to go get firsthand from the regulators, like how do we conform with these regulations? What are you looking for? And I think that dialogue benefits going both ways. But now we open those doors to the ancillary businesses to attend those. And if we had almost like a cannabis university with a formal training criteria that might be implemented anyway for the licensees, but now we open it up to ancillary businesses, even without changing the license structure or creating a new license or creating the criteria that says, oh, we're going to allocate this many licenses. There is a place in the existing license application where you list your resume and you get points based on your organization. And I would think that if somebody goes through the state formal training program, then that could look favorable to somebody that's judging this and say, look, they graduated from this. They are already familiar with the regulation. So I think there's maybe something to look at that, like without changing criteria, it helps boost a resume for those people that are willing to participate, show up, go through the right education and say, look, I've done the work, I've qualified, I actually have the same insights or similar insights to what the licensees are going through. And that could be viewed as either favorable for a license or maybe even the minimum criteria to do something like a commissary kitchen or a co-op or something like that. It's like, if you want to, to make sure that we're just not getting everybody coming through there and posing a risk to the licensees, a way to mitigate that would be to require those ancillary businesses to go through a formal training program prior to even partnering up with the licensee or getting inside of a facility. And I think that obviously works on both sides. From the regulatory side, we're making sure we have an opportunity to get the right education, the people that need it. And that might not always be the people that have worked 10 years in the cannabis industry. And, I've gone through every iteration of the regulations. You're like, how do we make it a little bit less intimidating for the people that want to get involved, but that regulatory barrier is extremely intimidating for some people to be able to move through and know, like, there's an assistance, there's an education program that will give me everything that I need to be successful. Maybe not everything, but I at least get there.
A foundation.
Yeah, part of it.
Start somewhere.
Okay. Anything?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that the training is going to be important, especially if we're considering like this farmers market co-op type of situation. And we're opening it up to anyone. I think that we definitely want to make sure you go through the training first before you even apply. And that way you are prepared to understand what it is you're getting yourself into, essentially. And then, like you said, make it part of the application, that they've gone through the certified training, and understand the steps that are going to be required in order to come in. And I think there should be some training and education on predatory practices from people that try to take advantage of those that are in the space that don't know any better and don't understand that it's different from any other industry that you encounter. Because if you are already in business, you might think, oh, I know what to do, but cannabis is different. And so I think that, I think the education is going to be key. And I also think that even with the supply chain side, there needs to be some support from this. There will have to be support from the state to help people understand what that even is. A lot of people don't grasp the concept of what the supply chain for the cannabis space is, because any other industry, it's easy to know what the supply chain is, but I think that it will require some education and some outreach if we want to implement that program here as well. Just helping businesses that are already in business understand what it would be to have their services or products be supporting the cannabis space.
Well, and even going back to formal education, it's outside of cannabis, you have vetted suppliers for certain things, that they have certain qualifications and certifications. And as a buyer or procurement agent, like you can look at and say, okay, I know these people have at least gone through the right education to get this certification. And that's certainly something that I would look at favorably if I had an option of working with, it's like maybe not a packaging company, but that might be one as well, but a security company or something like that. It's like if they've gone through the formal training, then I would assume that those people are going to get a nod, especially like it makes it easier for licensees to understand that they've gone through that. So, all right. Any other comments on this agenda item? Okay. Well, I guess let's move on to our final agenda item, which is going to be agenda item number 7. So future meetings and deliverables. One thing that you brought up, the legislative session, it's a question that I asked, and I probably will have an answer shortly within the next week and maybe apply it to the next ones. But I'd like to put this on our radar as something to consider. And I would assume that we would have an opportunity here if we wanted to create recommendations prior to the legislative session. Even if there's no formal pathway to present those, there's always through public comments and other things that could carry the weight of this committee as well. So it's something that I'm going to look into, but I wanted to bring it up now because what I'd like you all to do is think about, like, are there things that are important enough that we want to introduce on that timeline to be able to be discussed at the legislative session? And of course, there's probably plenty of things outside of this subcommittee, but ideally we limit it to our focus areas here.
I'd like to add to that, that if we're talking about the most disenfranchised or the communities that have been left out the most, which is identified in this language that we are specifically talking about, then we have to understand that there's a social justice component and that's tied and attached to that as well. It's why they find themselves as the marginalized. And so I think if we are considering creating some language that's going to go forward to legislators, that we can't leave the elephant in the room and not have that discussion and put it on the table, and considering how we create pathways for those that, have been criminalized by trying to pursue to be a part of this industry. And I think we have to speak directly to that community because that is how we target. I know that that's the goal of the CCB, to eliminate, which is a very harsh word, but to minimize the illicit market and the legacy market. And how do we do that? How do we bring more people into the legal market, make it attractive, make it attainable for them? It is by having a discussion around how we create those pathways, because they have been the ones that have been most harmed. So I think we don't speak, it's not one of the groups we specifically mentioned in this legislation, but obviously those groups have been impacted by the criminal justice system here. And so I think it's important that when we come up with ideas and we're starting to have these conversations and ideas, to understand that those groups we have to consider those groups as well.
Well, and I think it does fall within like the market participation side of things,
Absolutely.
Right? If we're going to create opportunities for people to eventually enter the licensed space, then, you know, I think those standards of expectation also apply prior to them getting a license. So when we're talking about going back to like including hemp farmers, you know, at some point you can say you can have a deadline for social justice and say, okay, anything prior to this date, you know, call it, you know, legalization, or when we implemented a regulated structure here, anything prior to that is almost like no harm, no foul. But you know, if you're a hemp farmer and wanting to get into cannabis, and we are able to create some sort of participation where, as an ancillary business or market support, and during that time that you're working with our industry, you do get caught doing a violation that would be going against our industry. Like, I mean, I think that should be taken seriously, because now here's the current framework. Everybody knows what the expectations are. And if you choose to keep doing it on that point, then, you know, yeah. How can anybody assume that you're not going to follow the laws in the cannabis industry if you're not doing it in the hemp industry or something like that? So, but other things for future meetings, I think please take a look at this, and as it pertains to your specific groups, and see if there's anything we want to expand. This is probably the tip of the iceberg, and you can find the state programs that, you know, might reflect what you're looking for, and then go deeper into there. What I liked about this, like, if you look at the electronic version, it gives all the links to the state programs and some even private organizations and everything that support it. But I think to dive into this for some homework, I think going back towards yours, like, let's do a little bit more research maybe into the event permits, and if any of that language we could influence that or make suggestions there that might address some of that. I'm certainly going to look more into the formal training side, both for licensees, but expanding that to the ancillary program. So maybe for everybody, dive into seeing what states do have training programs that are open to non-licensees, and then plus the timeline. And I know you got a comment, so I'll get to you in 1 second. But like
the timeline, that's all.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And then on this next one, we'll make sure that we don't have such a big of a gap between meetings. So probably we'll make the next one in about a month, and we'll coordinate schedules offline. But that should be able for us to come to the table with some ideas of at least like, what do we want to accelerate from this subcommittee that might be able to effectuate the legislative session. And then there might be other things that wouldn't require legislative change that we just make them a secondary, tertiary priority to discuss, knowing that we don't have the same deadline. So do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, October is probably the best time for us to have a report or recommendations, some solid recommendations, if we want to go to legislation with what we want to do, because they're already drafting. And so I just wanted to add that. I think October, November time is probably the final, if we want to get something structured to them.
Agreed. Perfect. Okay. Any other suggestions or comments on deliverable? Oh, sorry, I had one more. If there's anybody that you all feel would be a good presenter, any outside expertise that we want to bring in, or whether they're in Nevada, outside Nevada, please feel free to pass those suggestions to Sarah as well, and I'll get to the rest of the group. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, so we'll move on to, I guess, agenda item number 8, and we'll open it back up for public comment. So same rules apply as before. We will start here locally to give anybody else online the ability to call in. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and Sarah will give you a 30-second heads up. And please feel free to restate your name for the record.
Right on. Thanks for the record, Timothy Eliado. And I just wanted to jump in quickly to make that drive this point home that the idea of it's pretty much a double-edged sword when it comes to education, right? Let's look currently, the operators that are currently in operation. Just speaking from an expertise level, because I helped raise over $800,000 for an established lab here. So I've been through that process, okay? Some do have the expertise in this community based on our work, and we understand how the market operates. Just to list another problem that we have currently in the market is what the hop lane virus issues, okay? Right now, let's look at what's the number one affecting the fair market value. We have in what either plants are, hermaphrodites, or they're yielding below, average. So we have a yield issue and we have a plant disease issue. There is supposed to be a regulatory component to this someday in the future when the CCB really wants to really address some of these issues that we have in this industry pertaining to that, because I don't think it's still safe that the market in terms of consumers are not even aware that, there is product that are basically affected with hop lane virus that are being sold in these stores. Okay, so it all comes back to operators again. So someone like me, if I were to, with my experience and expertise, based on the demographics, we don't get the opportunity to be able to make any of this. I had this young lady speak. Unless you have an expertise in cultivation and production and laboratory, there are certain things that you wouldn't understand. Okay, so for those that do have that expertise, I think that our voices need to be, also elevated, like others that have, even though they may not have the clear oversight of what's currently happening in this industry. Some do have limited, in which I do understand that it's part of a community, but there are others in the community with vast expertise in this industry, and it's been proven. Okay, so with that on record, I would like to state that it's a double-edged sword. We have to look into what is currently working, and we have to address those issues. And if we have to mitigate the issues that's currently not working, because not all the operators that have the initial funding were able to succeed in the market, right? What were the main issues? What was the results of what they established that basically did, led them to failure? So I think, once again, real voices with expertise are missing. We only have limited amounts, whether it's 2 or 3 minutes, and that's the only thing you ever hear from us. Anything you discuss right now in terms of access to capital, I stated all this on record during the introduction of the consumption launch bill when Assemblyman Steve Yeager introduced this. So if you want to go back and then listen to that, you'd understand that everything was predicted as it's happening now 3 years ago. So for some of us that had already predicted this and are seeing the results of it, it's not a coincidence. And we do not want to keep waiting for the same event to keep perpetuating based on. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you.
Round two. Hey, Ed Alexander for the record, owner of Soul Cannabis, licensed up in Northern Nevada. Hey, this was an enlightening meeting. I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that I agree with, a couple of things I disagree with. First of all, there's a training program that exists right now, right? ed@soulisbetter.com. Cultivation, production, dispensary licenses. Currently, every group that's being talked about being represented is employed in my facilities. So we have a training program in place. It's called Get an Agent Card, come on down and put in the work. So I'm not trying to discredit or buck the system and what we're talking about, but we have the ability to do that today.
Required.
100%. I mean, I'm talking about on-the-job training. The same thing. I spent 20 years on the side of a mountain getting on-the-job training. Guess what? And I got an agent card. From the production side of the house, if there's brands that think that there's a place to come to market, once again, reach out, because we got a production facility, and I'm all about, hey, if there's something that's marketable and there's a market for it. There is currently so many white label deals going on within this space, guys, that I think we're talking about things that, we're looking for a solution to a problem that may or may not be as real as we're talking about. Because everybody, and I mean this with respect, this old white guy wants in cannabis until it's time to write the check, right? It doesn't change. The barrier for threshold isn't whether or not we've got training programs or this or that, because you could hand out a license. You still got to spend $1 million to hang the lights. You could hand out a license. You still got to build the kitchen. You know, the reality is there's more people wanting out of this industry than wanting in. And until you know what, you know, part of the reason why folks are having trouble accessing capital, regardless of affiliation, colored, anything else, is because the market's crashing. So folks want to come to a party that they have no idea how ugly the party currently is. So all I would say is I can tell you this, as a dispensary owner, if there is a social equity consumption lounge that is opened out there, reach out to me, because guess what? I will help you at the same ticket that the wholesale market is participating at right now. You want to talk about the reason that the industry's failing? The pink elephant in the room is, hey, guess what? The legacy market's kicking our ass. So we got to figure out, you want to be participating in the legacy market, or you want to make the transition into the regulated market? Because I guarantee you, once you transition, you wish you were back on the side of a mountain. So just be very, very, very careful about what you all wish for. And let's not try to reinvent the wheel, because everything that I've heard about so far already exists. The reason why hemp's failing is because, oh, that's right, there wasn't a market for 27,000 million kilos of CBD. Nobody decided to deal with fiber. You know, there wasn't a complete usage of the plant. Respectfully, group, yeah, you guys crush it. Keep doing what you're doing, but just be mindful of the fact that somewhere between here and there is the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
So round two.
Mhm.
So once again, for the record, Denise Mejia. And just a little bit of why I'm so adamant to be here today in so many different levels, not only because I'm in the cannabis industry, but I'm also in the litigation industry, do work comp litigation as a profession. But one of the things that concerned me from the gentleman who just shared a little bit of his feedback, what you've shared today and what we've heard today, it surprises me that the CCB hasn't allocated some of this money that they get from taxes from a lot of these dispensaries and facilities towards an educational institution type program, and can allocate some of this funding or bring in some of these vendors, such as the gentleman who just shared his proposal here, putting it on the table, who would not be interested on affiliating themselves as an institutional program to provide these services and collaborate together and join forces. If we don't do it that way, we're going to be pushing who can, and then there's preferences again back on the table. We need to come together. If we have these dispensaries and we have labs and we have people that are willing to say, hey, part of my taxes that I'm paying, allocate a bill that's part of that is going to go towards an institution for education, and enforce that and have them bring to the table what they're going to offer and check off to do the certification process that people go through. That's another alternative. You have UNLV. They have a cannabis program. Have we connected them? Have we reached out to them? Has CCB done any kind of relationship with them to see what's the opportunity there? Any of the students that have licenses, can they go through a pre-presentation of a concept? Because when you hire social equity communities and you bring them aboard with nonprofit organizations that don't have the capacity, the knowledge, the experience, the background, you're putting them out there to fail. And all it becomes is a predatory result. And that's what's happened. So if we can bring in the resources, we can join forces, we can work together and use some of this thousands of dollars, because you can't tell me that you guys don't get enough money at CCB out of all of these dispensaries, out of all of these cannabis industries, to allocate some of this funding some way, somehow that's uniform, and that is some way, somehow joining forces here, because I think that's what we really need here, but not be in a situation where it's them versus us and who has the money and who create it. And bring it to the table, because I guarantee you that he's not the only one that's available here. My organization is available here as well, and many others would be willing to do the same thing. It just hasn't been proposed because we're so focused on trying to just make the money. But I gotta say, from a legislative leader myself, I belong with the BizFed organization in Los Angeles. I will be at legislation in DC. I will be there, and I will be speaking, because there are issues here and in LA that I address. But it's important that we also address the issue from a community. Where's our leadership? If we want to get the voice out, they have their websites. Why aren't we joining forces with leadership to announce the events, the institutions, the programs, so that they can do their due diligence? How do we join them? How do we bring them to the table to be part of this, just like anything else that we're trying to do in our communities? That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you. My name is Katrina Saunders, for the record, and we've had these models that you mentioned. We've had a co-op model. That's how I met Ellie. I used to help him with clones, and we were helping patients learn how to grow and teach them small amounts with clones. We already had this model in place. We already had a co-op model in place. We already had a farmer's market. All these things were in place until the dispensary model came in and wiped everything out, and they changed legislation. Also, the part with legislation, I was wrote out of the lounge licensing language by 0.5% because I wasn't in an impacted area, because I've been homeless intermittently for the past 10 years. They knew that into account. That's another reason why legislation is part of the problem in the legal lies, because once again, the legal lies are written and I was written out of legislation. 3 years ago, when I first came back, I was working with CEIC, and they wanted me to push their narrative so they could get the lounges passed for whatever reason. I went to a meeting and they had guns pulled on me to try to intimidate me to get me to go along with them. I don't work with any Black social justice groups because I feel like they're on the side of corporate cannabis, and that's not my narrative. I lost my family, my livelihood, while I helped build an industry that I'm still struggling to get back in. I had to have legislative laws just for me to work and make money, while I've watched everybody make money and I've had to struggle in the process. I've already reached out to legislators. I said building generational wealth should look like ownership. Cultivations, dispensaries, laboratories, productions, distributors, consumption lounges, so that all this is taken care of. It needs to be all avenues of business. Everyone needs to have access. Everything that is currently existing in business needs to be opened up to social equity so that we can have a fair playing market. There doesn't need to be criminalized for legacy market. These are just people trying to operate and feed their friends and family, just like how you guys are. They just don't have the millions of dollars in capital. You're talking about people who don't have business acumen. I actually went to Columbia Business School. I have the business background. I have the background because I was there at the cultivation dispensaries more than the owners who opened it. I have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the business acumen. I just need access to a license so that I can do what needs to be done. People don't want to buy medicine that has been remediated. That's probably why there's an influx on people buying hemp products. My kids live in North Carolina. I've bought hemp products that are probably better than some of the stuff here grown in the place that's been lab tested, but it's remediated with radiation, has mold. There's problems that need to be addressed. That's why the legacy market is thriving as well. It's not just due to them not wanting coming to the dispensary. You can't force people to buy bad, tainted, remediated radiation products with mold. That's crazy. As a consumer, as a patient, you know what I do? I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to go support people who I know they're not trying to freaking kill me with radiation, mold. I know the hemp products are tested. They have labs. I've gone to the labs. I've looked at their tests. They're kosher. They're not necessarily a bad thing. We need to be working cohesively so there's not another war 2.0, and that everybody can eat and thrive in a peaceful environment of how God designed us to. My name is Katrina Saunders. Thank you for your time. And I also will send something because I have listed probably 3 years ago that I ran it because I went to business school about education, about ancillary businesses, about how we could have the state people who come, the tourists, fund everything, and we wouldn't have to worry about where we're going to get the money from. If you guys would like to listen to me and have a viable person who's been affected by the war, who's worked in the industry from medical to retail, patient, advisor, everything, I'm your girl. Please reach out to me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Chandler Cooks, owner of Greenwood Investment Group, representing Moulin Noir Cannabis Lounge. This was a great meeting. Let me start off with that. A lot of great comments made. And not to sound like a broken record, I don't want to repeat everything said, but one of the things that I do want to mention, and I hope that CCB considers some type of partnership with Department of Ag or Department of Health and Human Services, whoever is regulating hemp. There's been a company called CannaGlobe. A lot of people who aren't into cannabis have been approaching me, wondering, is this a virtual dispensary? I'm hearing so much about it, but the hemp and THC thing is a true problem. But some of my comments I want to make is about or proposals. grant programs for cannabis businesses that are doing the research, like with veterans or with any other groups that are just, deserve that research being done. And then the Cannabis Business Acceleration Program. So the City of Las Vegas and the City of North Las Vegas are currently doing a business accelerator and business incubation program for small businesses and existing businesses in the community. I think that in alignment with what Ed said about, the cannabis education and what was mentioned here, I think there's some great alignment there between, the city and then the chambers. So Urban Chamber of Commerce, Vegas Chamber of Commerce, they also have some education programs on business that I think would be very helpful when creating this formal education program. And then couple licenses. So these are some ideas I had. I'm not sure how they would look in reality, but of course the nursery license, I heard that brought up. I think genetic preservation is very important. Even turning this formal education into another ancillary license where certain entities, could be that certified education program. And then what I also heard from Nicole was a chef license. I think that could also be an innovative way where we can destigmatize cannabis, allow certain culinary professionals to receive product infused and then, infuse foods and beverages from there. So yeah, that's my comments for today. Thank you for the meeting.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Janet.
Because everybody else had a round two, I can. Again, for the record, my name is Alyssa Lloyd, owner of Didiri, Nevada. I think a lot of points were represented and presented again in this round two session today, but I'd just like to, again, I think bring a different perspective, which I think is a kind of a middle ground road for both. I operate in the regulated market alongside Ed and a ton of our other great participants in this industry. And I think one thing that I hear Ed say and I hear other people saying is that there has to be a middle ground somewhere. For me, myself, I know that I have to operate in the regulated industry. Ed, you have to operate in the regulated industry. So I hear the conversation about the legacy market and things like that. How do we, it sounds like some of these people do not want to be regulated. The thing is, we have to compete in this regulated market. I am not a millionaire. I don't come from millions of dollars. And I work hand in hand with my team in our labs. So yes, the expertise and the business ownership is there. We have to figure out how to remove the personal bias, I think, to it and figure out that middle ground. And that again presents, I think, that opportunity for the co-op shared marketplace where we could have businesses like Ed's that are, it's not the responsibility of Ed to educate the market. He's doing that on his own free will, on his own dime, on his own time. That's the CCB's responsibility. So having that marketplace type of, setup will allow operations that already exist, such as to participate with the CCB and educate the market and make sure that the people that we will compete against, because at the end of the day, we will compete against these people, the people that we compete against will compete in a regulated market. Even if we are giving them the education, it will be a level playing field. So I think that, we tiptoe on a very fine line where we do need to provide the education and the access, but we also need to make sure that these people have can learn the business acumen to operate a business. Because just because you know what the plant does or how to grow the plant or how to extract from a plant or anything of that nature, it doesn't mean that you know how to operate a business, which at the end of the day, that's what everybody has to know how to do. So we need to figure out how to make all of this work together, which I think could be under that same roof. So we don't need to, have all of these different pieces. Everything could be under the same roof and it could give access to all of those who are desperately asking for access. And I'm probably beating a dead horse because I did, mention quite a few of these points initially, but just to, drive that home, like Ed said, there are businesses that are in existence that are willing to support. And I think I offered that up for Didiri as well. And I think we just have to figure out how to make it all come together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more local public comments? Okay, we'll move. Ember, is there anybody online that?
If you wish to provide public comment, dial *9 to raise your hand. Caller with the last four digits 1657, please dial *6 to unmute. Go ahead, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Abad Pisa. I've heard a lot of great ideas, but in order to bring in the legacy market, it's not necessarily making things fair. If you do want to make things fair, then allow people to fail, because everything that I've heard is to curate it around these people who don't want their businesses to fail, which everyone understands, you know what I mean? But that's not realistic. That's not real. And I'm going to reiterate the James Parsons versus the state of Nevada, because we shouldn't, there's a lot of things that occurred, from HIPAA violations to all kinds of stuff that should have just, you know, been able to, again, allow anyone to be able to start a business. And if you fail in that business, to fail, because that's where the best fruit are going to come from. You know what I'm saying? Like, granted, it's not the, you know, hold the baby by the hand, you know, show them how to drink water and everything kind of thing. But this is coming from someone who's also been raided multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, you guys talk about pick yourself up from your bootstraps and get to work and all this stuff, but it hasn't been that way. What ended up happening was you guys cornered the market and brought it up the way that you guys wanted to bring it up, and that's why you're having all these different issues. I guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no more public comment on the phone.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment. And for the next one, just remind everybody, if you did want to submit public comments in writing for the next hearing, you can go to the agenda, and on the bottom, you've got the email address, cacmeetings@ccb.nv.gov. And then they'll be read into the next one. So with that, I guess we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, members, for your participation, and thank you everybody that provided public comments and was in the audience. And we're looking forward to the next one. Thank you.